Okay, we are now live, counting down from 15, 14, 13, 12, 11. It's Tillis, right?
It is.
Like the country singer Mel Tillis. That's the only way I'm going to ever get it right. Like Tillis. 9, 8. I am Earl Holland here live with another Sports Refuge NFL playoff preview. We are here talking about one more team in this hunt whose season unfortunately ended in one of the most bizarrest of fashions, and we're going to get into that as well. It is the Indianapolis Colts, and they were one of the favorites in the NFC South, and then of course they're playing in a tough division and very competitive AFC, especially with the addition of an extra playoff spot. But here with me to talk about the Indianapolis Colts and their season is longtime Indianapolis Colts fan Spenser Tilus. Of course, you guys have seen him on previous podcasts, the episode called The Spenser System that I had that came out, and we'll, of course, when we do the final product, we will bring that back to you in a loop as well. But Spenser, really glad to have you here talking about the Colts. I know it's a little tough, especially a few days after the aftermath of the season, but I'm glad to have you here to at least get insight on what you thought the expectations were for this season.
I appreciate it, Earl. I guess, the phase of recovery begins with talking our way through it. So let's just go ahead and get on the therapist's little couch right now and talk about the painful season that was, man. It really, really definitely was.
They say acceptance is the final key to grief. And it seems like you're already there a couple of days later.
I don't know what else to do. I had hit a point watching Carson Wentz all season that it was like you could just see. And I was expecting at some point, like I actually even went into the game being like, how could we possibly blow this? Like tongue in cheek, like we have a 14.5-point favorites. We're playing a team that's terrible. They don't even have a head coach. Like there's no way we can lose. Their own fans are calling it Clown Town and protesting the game. And that is the team that just beat the brakes off of us and into this poetic, painful run that is Carson Wentz and a guy that we're stuck at the hip with here for a couple of years now. So I laugh to not cry pretty much right now watching what happened to this team.
And I know that's a lot of stuff we're going to unpack in this discussion, but as we start to get into it, how did you become an Indianapolis Colts fan? I know you grew up in California, and that had to be interesting being a Colts fan in California.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't expect it because I was way over there, but I started as a college football fan, and it was very casual. I just kind of would watch whatever game was on. And Peyton Manning was my favorite college football player. I used to just love watching him when he was with the balls. And at a certain point, I was just like, wherever he goes, I'm going to be a fan of that team. And so then obviously he ends up in Indy, and I started watching him there and kind of just became a fan through that. And then there was a real weird turning point where my first reporting job was in Colorado, and I got there, and then 2 days later is when he actually signed with the Broncos, and I had this like come to God moment of like, does this now make me a Broncos fan? Do I jump ship and switch things over to Bronco country? And eventually I decided that like I wanted to, see him do well over there, but I was going to stay the Colts. Like I'd rather have commitment to one squad than kind of jump around as players like switch around. And especially in this era of sports where it feels like free agency is like the player development or player like empowerment is more than ever, where they're jumping around all over the place. And I decided better just stick with him there, stick with my team.
In your memory, what is your biggest Colts moment? Is it the Super Bowl pick? Is it Super Bowl win against the Bears? Is it the selection of Andrew Luck? Is it something else that we haven't even broached on that you think is probably bigger than those at all?
I first of all, the losses I remember more than the wins. Like losing to the Saints in the Super Bowl hurt way more than beating the Bears in the Super Bowl. Like I remember that way more. The Bears, I wasn't even having any kind of concern about. I never thought we were going to lose to them, honestly, going in. They were solid on defense, but like, what are you going to do against Peyton Manning? And they had no offense, and we were ticking at that point. The one win that I think stands out above the most is when we finally beat the Patriots in the AFC Championship. And I remember the Patriots were driving, and it felt like one of those situations again where Tom Brady was just going to rip our heart out. And then we finally got an interception at about like the 45, 40-yard line that iced the game. And it was euphoric. It was an unbelievable moment where it felt like finally we had slayed Goliath, and a guy that has he always had our number. Like I wanted to call it a rivalry, but it's not a rivalry if you don't beat him. And we never seemed to beat the Patriots, and then finally getting him in the playoffs. And then obviously the next game we got to play the Bears, but like beating Tom Brady, and even though it was only AFC Championship, was so much more rewarding almost than beating the Bears in the Super Bowl. Like it's just the fact that we beat him in the playoffs, a guy that had destroyed our hearts so many times. That one, I think, was the best feeling win I've ever had as a fan.
Going into the season, what were the expectations? I know the acquisition of Carson Wentz solidified a quarterback position that has gone through several different starters over the past few years. Phillip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett, Andrew Luck, all those guys. What were the expectations for the Colts, especially competing in the South where, you always have to look up at Tennessee?
We got to double-digit wins with Phillip Rivers, and my guy he runs like he's got a refrigerator on his back. He cannot move, and he can't push the ball further than 10 yards down the field. And we got to double-digit wins with him. And so Carson Wentz should be an upgrade. There's no reason we shouldn't have gotten to 10, 11 wins going into the season. I still thought going in with, King Henry was still healthy going into the season. I didn't think we could probably beat the Titans for the division title. I thought they'd end up with about 12, maybe 13 wins, but I didn't think it was outside the realm of possibility. I thought we should get to 11 wins probably at least. And with that, you should get a wild card. And I thought we would be probably one of the most dangerous wild card teams and have a legitimate shot of winning that first round playoff game and then kind of rolling the dice from there. So for me, we were making it to the second week of playoffs. Like, at least like that was the floor. And then if things go your way, you see what happens. I mean, you see upsets and you see guys that can go on runs all the time in the playoffs, and who knows, but having the running game that we had, having that young, incredible defense that we had, and being solid on special teams. I mean, you check all the boxes. We had the most Pro Bowl players of any team in the league, and we didn't even make the playoffs. Like it is, if that's not the most damning thing that you can say about a quarterback, I don't know what's left. Like, that is unbelievable that a roster that is as talented as they are doesn't get to a point where you get into the playoffs when they add an extra playoff team this year on top of everything else.
Was there a particular moment on the schedule, a particular game that made you feel like, okay, this team is primed for the playoffs? Nothing can stop us. Was it a game, the win against the Bills, the demolition of the Bills? Was it beating the Niners the way they did in grand fashion, or even beating the Patriots on December 18th? Which one of those games, if anything, was a huge push in the right direction for the Colts?
I really honestly think it was the Patriots, because like at that point we were rolling. Or honestly, even if you want to take it a step further, when we beat the Cardinals, when we were just our roster was just dealing with COVID and we were extremely shorthanded. Granted, I mean, the Cardinals hadn't been playing as well, but they still had Kyler Murray. They still had a lot of their studs. And we went into that game with shambles of a roster and still somehow pulled out that win. At that point, like I was like, all right, like we just went through the hardest part of our schedule. All we got left, like really on the schedule, is the Raiders and the Jaguars, a JV team. Like, there's no way at this point we're not going to get in. We are in control of our own destiny, and we had just seemed to be ticking on all cylinders. And the last month, Jonathan Taylor had been unstoppable, and it was like, all right, like we found the recipe, like we're doing what we need to do, and the team has really turned the corner. So at that point, like, I'm glad I'm not a full-blown betting man or like someone hadn't bet me anything, because I would have bet everything I owned that we were making the playoffs at that point and that we had a good stretch. You probably, old takes exposed, could probably go through my Twitter street. I probably had something about us winning the Super Bowl at that point, because it felt like we were the team that was the most dangerous in the NFL. Not anymore. Not anymore.
Of the games that you lost of the season, which one was the most damning one? Was it the Jacksonville game, or was it the Raiders game, seeing especially they got that spot over the Colts? Or was it something else earlier in the schedule that makes you scratch your head and think, how did we lose to this team, and which game was more damning?
There was a lot of low moments because every close game, you end up relying on Carson Wentz, who's about as reliable as a table that's got three legs, and it was just tough to watch. That Jaguars loss, I've been a sports fan my entire life. That might be the worst regular season loss I have ever seen, and you could argue it might be even worse than some of the playoff losses or postseason for other sports. Everything stacked up that we should have just ran them off the field, and they had more sacks in that game than they had in any other game this season. They scored more points in that game than any game they did the rest of the season. That was the biggest spread switch that they've had in any game this season. Like, there were so many things that you look at where we made them look like the Monstars, and it was like that first scrimmage against them in Space Jam, where all of a sudden they were just like dunking on us at every single play, and it was a train wreck. It was an absolute train wreck from the very beginning, and you could just see it coming. They scored a touchdown on their opening drive, and it was like, oh my God, like we're not really going to do this, right? There's no way. And it was just in slow motion, and you couldn't see any way to stop it. And just, it was so painful. Like, it was so painful to watch. And then I have like the worst set of friends I've probably of anybody, because I had to basically turn off my phone after everybody thought it'd be really funny to check in on me and see how I was doing in that moment. And it wasn't funny and it wasn't fun, but like, what are you going to do? And like, that was by far not just this season. That was the worst regular season loss of me as a fandom I've ever had, because that was just brutal, absolutely brutal.
Looking at what could have been in the AFC playoff bracket, if the Colts had made the playoffs, who would you have felt would have been a favorable matchup in the AFC?
I felt pretty confident against everybody. Like, the team that I feel like we matched up probably worse against was the Titans, but you're not going to play them, obviously, like in the division straight off like that. I think we matched up well with the Chiefs. We could have ran the ball and played defense and kind of kept Pat Mahomes off the field a little bit. If there was anybody, honestly, that I feel like would have been kind of dangerous, I wouldn't have really wanted to play the Patriots right off the back. I don't like going up against Bill Belichick in the playoffs right off the back. And I feel like they would have been able to keep it close. And in a close game, I'd have to rely on the one man that I have no faith in Carson Wentz. And basically, we would have our team, they would have their team, as well as the addition of playing against Carson Wentz. And I don't really like that matchup at all. The Bills are so up and down that I feel like they could have, obviously, when they're clicking, they're one of the toughest outs that there is. But we'd played them well before. And so I would say probably of anyone, the Titans would have been a pretty tough matchup, just because they do a lot of what we do. They just do it a little bit better. And then no one really ever wants to see Bill Belichick in the playoffs. Like, no one, you may say you do, but it's kind of outside, I guess, now Georgia this year. I was like, no one really wants to see Nick Saban. No one really wants to see Bill Belichick. You can say it, but there's a reason that they're at top of the mountain, like, as often as they are.
Uh, Going to Carson Wentz, do you feel like there's a little bit of buyer's remorse right now after the acquisition, the picks that were given up, and seeing that that's a heavy investment in a quarterback that you're hoping will lead you behind center for several years, especially given the sporadic nature and change of who's been playing quarterback for the past 4 years. Uh, your thoughts on Carson Wentz and the acquisition and really how he performed this year?
Buyer's remorse is the wrong term because that like goes in with the thought that maybe you won the buy. It was more like we were hamstrung and had to make a deal, and we lost out on everybody we wanted, and he was all that was left, and they were able to just gouge us. When the trade happened, I was livid. Like I was like, this is a horrible deal for us. Um, but the thing is, it literally stems all the way back to when Andrew Luck retired. We were built on a timeline to win in the next few years. And then when your franchise quarterback retires, your entire timeline gets shot. Like we had so much talent. As again, like we had 8 Pro Bowlers. We have the most in the NFL. Our roster is stacked, and you're trying to win right now because so many other positions, like you age out so quickly that we needed just a plug-in guy to try and go. And we tried it with Rivers, and it was okay. And then when he leaves, and so we were trying to just find a guy that lightning in a bottle because the rest of the roster was so set. That being said, that trade's going to set us back for years, like years. We lose a first-round draft pick because he played for over 75% of the snaps. So not only did we miss out on the playoffs, but now we lose a first-round draft pick, so we're not going to be able to get a quarterback next year. We can't cut him because if we cut him, it goes $15.5 million against the cap next year. So he has to play at least next year as well. So not only did we throw away this season, we threw away next season, potentially, unless he somehow discovers how to play football again, which I'm not betting on. And then if that doesn't work out, we're still not getting a quarterback in the first round this year. We don't have any other quarterback really on the roster other than the kid from Texas, who I'm not wildly thrilled about. I mean, the fact that you can't beat out right now Wentz and kind of get the job, or like even when we were in the situation where Wentz was dealing with COVID, we didn't know what we were going to do. We had made a call to Phillip Rivers, 86-year-old Phillip Rivers, who we were trying to pull off the couch to come save us. So clearly we don't have much faith in our backup right now. So where does it come then? So I guess you after next season, do you go into the draft and then try and find a quarterback? By that time, so many of the rookie deals are going to be up on the guys that are young studs on us. So many of the guys are going to start to age out, and your entire timeline again about when you think you can win is thrown off. So unless we can bamboozle somebody to give a trade and get rid of Wentz, and maybe we can go get Russell Wilson on something, or maybe you can go get Deshaun. There's no other real set out there or another path for us other than to just be like, well, Lord, it's in your hands. We're going to go send back.
I'm thinking I have a little bit of hearing issues with your audio. Yeah, Spencer, I think your audio dropped a little bit. It started talking about I can't hear you, but can you still hear me? I think I got your I think I hear something in the background now.
Okay. When did it cut out?
It cut out, I think, leaving it in God's hands, pretty much.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah, like because we're married to a guy that we don't want, but he was the best option out, and now we're stuck. It is. So we're gonna probably just roll him out again next year and hope for the best.
I think we're having another dropout again on audio. It's the nature of live broadcast. When you have it, sometimes weird things happen when you're doing live broadcast. Believe me, I've had it. As you just saw, I had a flub there with the with the intro playing again. But yeah, when any type of live nature, when live broadcasts occur, you never know what's going to go through. As we're still working on getting the audio back with Spenser Tilus. Yeah, and it is very interesting just seeing that whole Carson Wentz thing where as he said, the Eagles probably got the best of that trade. I think the biggest thing is but yeah, the biggest thing is when it comes to the biggest thing is that when it comes to trades like that, you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes people can get revitalized, and it can lead to a rebirth and a rebound. And then other times you get the situations where all of a sudden, you're sort of getting one of those let the buyer beware type situations where who knows what you might end up getting. And that's I guess that's the nature of sports sometimes, where it tends to
there it goes.
be a little bit, it'd be a little bit sporadic. But yeah, you were just saying those situations where you end up getting somebody you really didn't want, but you have no choice to deal with, and you just got to play on with what you have.
Yeah, pretty much. And that doesn't really give you much faith as a fan, but do you celebrate just making the playoffs as a ceiling? I would think of a franchise that has been to the Super Bowl and has won, our expectations, our standards are higher than that. But Ballard's hands were tied. What do you got nothing. When Andrew Luck retires, when your franchise quarterback out of nowhere just retires, everything gets thrown out of whack. And because, that's the starting piece. If you lose your foundation, you end up with this. You end up signing a Phillip Rivers. You end up trying to find somebody to just help you get through, and try and find that Nick Foles situations, like what he did with the Eagles, where it's all right, maybe if we can find one guy that can have a good stretch, we can win this. But what are you going to do?
And the other thing I want to ask you, because there were two things I wanted to ask you, but we're going to look at Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor had one of the most eye-popping seasons that I saw. It's like you couldn't get away from it. Get away. Look at his stats. He was sort of out of this world, or I guess unearthly is the best term to use for that. But how can you describe this season, especially second year getting acclimated to the league? Already had almost 1,200 yards last year, 1,811 yards, 18 touchdowns, and all 17 games. What can you say about that?
He had over 2,000 scrimmage yards this year. Insane. Absolutely. Even he had that before their last game too. So in a regular season, if you were to say, even without the extra game, he put up incredible numbers and was a legitimate MVP candidate. I still think King Henry's probably the best running back in the league, but at this point, I don't think you can argue anyone legitimately is better than him other than that. Christian McCaffrey seems to be banged up too often. Dalvin Cook seems to be banged up too often. If you look at anywhere else, who's the second best running back if it is not him? He's got to be the second best running back in the league. And he came, I thought, out of nowhere, because traditionally I don't trust Wisconsin running backs because they always have the biggest offensive line. They play in the weak division, and they always rack up a bunch of yards and touchdowns, and they look great on numbers, but they hardly ever seemingly pan out in the league. I wasn't fond of the pick, to be honest with you, because we still had Marlon Mack, who rushed for 1,000 yards his rookie year, and we still had Hines, and I was all right, we already have a 1-2 punch at running back. He's not even going to be able to probably get carries. That's why I'm not the GM. That's why Ballard is the GM, and it's why he's one of the best GMs you could probably find, because his rookie year was, he burst on the scene, really kind of took over that lead spot, and you made Hines into a scat back kind of person. And then this year, he took it to another level. There was so many games that were in the mix, and he just absolutely just showed you the power in the hole. He showed you the explosion to get in the outside. He did everything. And for a guy his size to be able to run and see the holes and still have his speed is incredible. He is by far, I think, the best running back that we've had probably since Edgerrin James. And he's a little bit obviously different than Edgerrin James. Edgerrin James is more of a do-it-all scat back, but like he is the best running back we've probably had in the last like 20 years. And if you take away King Henry, he's the best running back in the league right now.
Yeah, and you know, you couldn't get away from, even when Henry was out, all you could hear is Jonathan Taylor, and he really put up those numbers and basically carried them on their back. One last question I asked before we go to the Super Bowl preview: how far do you think the Colts could have went on the legs of Jonathan Taylor?
All right, so you got 2 All-Pros, and you got the best offensive tackle in the entire league. You got Jonathan Taylor, and you got wideouts that kind of shifted from being down the field like it was during like the Peyton era to like more guys that can kind of like block and kind of do it. The run game was spectacular. The defense was great as well. I mean, we have a guy, the Darius Leonard, that, you know, was considered for the defensive player of the year. So if you just lean on the defense, you do ball control, and you let Jonathan Taylor run, I mean, I think there's absolutely no doubt we could have easily won the first game, you know, on the wild card on the road. At that point, it turns into a little bit of a coin flip. Do we make AFC Championship? I would not be surprised at all if we made it that far. And then it turns into, what do you get out of Carson Wentz? If he can give you a little bit, I don't think it would have been outside of the realm of possibility for us to make the Super Bowl this year. Like, I really honestly think everything was there. If we just got some sort of steady play out of the quarterback, we could have made that type of run and been something really special. Because he's just incredibly good that he can carry a team. Like, you just need a quarterback that doesn't make mistakes and occasionally makes some timely throws. And you could just literally let Jonathan Taylor carry the ball, carry that franchise all the way to the Super Bowl. We didn't have that. We did not have a guy that could just control it for 2 seconds between taking the snap and handing it off to him and not turning the ball. But yeah, I think especially.
I think you might have dropped out again.
You don't hear me?
Oh yeah, now I hear you.
I said after the run that we had of beating the Bills, of beating the Patriots, of beating the Cardinals, we showed that we could beat anybody in the league. And we showed that we could do it consecutive weeks. So there's no doubt in my mind that if we had that type of stretch, if we had that kind of play going, we couldn't have made it to the Super Bowl. So like, the ceiling realistically was the Super Bowl. And in my mind, still the floor should have been making the playoffs and being a wild card team that was in a close game 1. Somehow we didn't even reach our floor. I don't know how that happens, Earl. That's supposed to be the bottom. Worst case scenario is the floor, right? You can't go any further down than that. But Carson Wentz buried us. That's where we are right now. Like, you're not supposed to go any down. I don't know how that's possible. Not only for this year, again, buried us for next year because we lose a first-round pick. The guy is ruining our future and present. It's terrible.
Yeah, and an unfortunate thing. I mean, there's always a chance for a rebound and, you know, a full year maybe being able to get healthy and find what he used to have in Philadelphia, or at least what he was hyped about in Philadelphia, could turn things around. But, of course, there's always that point. It's always next year. But looking at the Super Bowl prediction, who do you have coming out of the AFC? Who do you have coming out of the NFC? Who wins the Super Bowl? What's the final score?
Oof. All right. It's so much about who's playing well and who is healthy at this point in the season. I really still feel like Green Bay is probably the team that's playing the best, and I feel like they're going to get the better this time around of Tom Brady to make it to the Super Bowl. And until somebody in that conference can tell me different, I still think Pat Mahomes still runs it. So if you're saying Packers and Chiefs, and I think in a weird way, Aaron Rodgers was about to win the Super Bowl again. And once that happens, who knows what's going to happen up in Green Bay if he somehow, after this tumultuous season that he's had and with the upper management and everything else, like, what do you do in that situation? But I think I'm going to go Packers, and I will go 33-27.
Yeah, still within, as I was saying before, so many people who made their predictions for the Super Bowl, a lot of them say it's going to be within one possession, and nothing has changed. Maybe one blowout that someone mentioned, but other than that, I think it's coming down to a touchdown or a field goal.
I think so. And I just, when you get to that point with how balanced so many of these teams are, it's really hard to see blowouts happen a lot of times. I mean, there's a couple that have happened in the past. I mean, the Seahawks just, when they blew out the Broncos, like every now and then you get ones like that, but it feels like lately there's been a little bit more parity across the league, and then it comes down to who's got a guy under center that can go down and make a couple plays and kind of lead you to that one score that makes the difference. And Aaron Rodgers is that dude. Like, as much as a lot of people don't like him, he is. I saw a stat the other day that said he had something like 135 touchdowns and 16 interceptions over the past 4 years, like averaging like 30 touchdowns to 4 picks per year, which is incredible. Like, incredible.
Yeah, and that's got to be crazy. And I know we're all going to be looking with bated breath to see who makes it out. Maybe we get some type of weird upset, and we get teams that you least expect. Maybe we might get the Cowboys, or maybe the weird thing, the Raiders, just by finding a way to stay alive, they might all of a sudden just parlay themselves. So many different stories, but we'll leave that to the odds makers in the NFL and rigging that. But you never know.
You think America's ready for the Cowboys making the Super Bowl? Do you know how obnoxious sports talk radio would turn into and everything? Like, leading into that week, like media week, would be absurd, especially if these COVID protocols stay in place in California and they move the Super Bowl to in Dallas, which is what they are rumored to be doing, trying to put it in AT&T Stadium. If it ends up being in Dallas and Dallas is in the Super Bowl, I don't know if we're ready. Earl, that might be more catastrophic than the entire pandemic. That literally might do us all in.
Unless it's the Steelers in the other end, because then, oh my God, the world will explode because it's Cowboys, Steelers in a Super Bowl. I'm already turning it off after the coin flip. That's all.
No kidding. The ratings would be pretty high for a lot of people, but I don't know if I'd be watching either. It'd be very painful.
Halftime show, definitely, then I turn it off. I mean, halftime show, definitely I would be watching, and then after, as soon as they finish, forgot about Dre, I'm done.
Speaking of like pregame shows and everything, I assume you watched the national championship game last night. Did you see what like retirement has done to my boy, Andrew Luck? Did you see the interview that they had with him? I didn't even recognize him at first. First of all, the day after the most embarrassing loss in our franchise history, our old franchise quarterback climbs off of some mountain where he's been doing like farming for the past like 10 years and no one's heard of him, and just somehow shows up at Lucas Oil Stadium, our stadium, on the sideline to do an interview for the first time in like 10 years. And he looks like he had he discovered the paleo diet and decided to stop working out completely. I didn't recognize him at all. He looks like he just went to Coachella. And somehow, like, you're just going to show up like, we're not ready. We're in pain right now. And now you show up. I was so not prepared to see Andrew Luck on the field in Indianapolis the day after that. It was ridiculous. It was so bad. It was so, as a Colts fan, that was like salt on the open wound to the max. Seeing a guy that was like, and make things even worse, this version of Andrew Luck, the guy that looks like he's just a freshman in high school, has never lifted a weight in his life, I would still take over Carson Wentz. I think he still beats the Jaguars. Like, at this point, like, I would, like, you wouldn't even have to sweet talk me that much, and I would take him right back and feel like we could have like made us a run with this guy. Like, it's a tough time right now, Earl. It's very tough for me.
Just seeing the Andrew Luck photo, it looks like that pic of Denzel, the boxing match with that mustache.
Yeah,
that's what I could think of the exact same look that Denzel has when he's sitting in that ringside seat at the boxing match. I think it was one of the Mayweather boxing matches with that hat on and everything. Yeah. That's what Andrew Luck looks like. And I'm thinking, say with some football players when they retire, either it's like you let the air out of a balloon or you just inflate it even more depending on who the guy is. So, yeah. I mean,
the air is out. It is out. he looks like, someone sent it to me, he looks like the Wild Thornberry dad that from the Nickelodeon show back in the day. Like, come on, man. Like, he may have left me, but I'm gonna defend his honor. Like, we ain't gonna do all that. Like, we ain't gonna just drag him through the coals. Like, it is tough. But why the day after? He has not shown his face in front of a camera literally since he was crying in his retirement speech, it feels like. And then the day after the most embarrassing loss in our franchise's history, he just happens to show up at our field, does an interview. They hit us with the graphic talking about all the stats and everything that he did there. And I was just like, come on now. Like, no one wants to see this. Like, why are we here? This is so painful.
Oh,
horrible, gosh. Earl. It was horrible.
Oh my gosh. All this extra Andrew Luck stuff I'm going to have to use for bonus content for the not only the podcast extra outside of the episode, but just for on YouTube as well, because I'm going to use that picture of Andrew Luck. Just the Andrew Luck Denzel photo.
It is ridiculous. I mean, there were so many more people that made like just unbelievably buried him online. Like, if you just search Andrew Luck and some of the the responses and stuff, it's bad, man. I don't know why did he choose the day after, Earl? It hadn't even been 24 hours. It had been 18 hours of pain, and all of a sudden Andrew Luck shows up like nothing happened. To be fair, he's probably got like a pager and doesn't even have a smartphone or internet, so he probably doesn't even know what happened. He's probably just been sitting up there like agriculture, a little on his mountain, just growing some crops, enjoying the day, and like his sundial told him it was time to go down the hill. Like, he's the strangest great professional athlete I've ever seen, heard, or like, he's so odd, and yet he was so good, and he ruined us, or we ruined him. It's on us, Earl. It was on us. We broke him.
They're people can go on days and days and days talking about Andrew Luck and what sort of went wrong in Indianapolis, but I know we're going to have to do that another time. But Spencer, I really appreciate you being here and doing this for the podcast. And as I was mentioning, we have a little breaking news. I want you to be my Lakers person for the NBA playoff preview when I start doing that, probably in March, because I'm going to start trying to do that because the insanity starts well before the playoffs.
That's an easy transition. I go from dragging Carson Wentz to dragging Russell Westbrook. I can easily do that for you, man. You want me to rant about him? I got time. I got time to do that as well.
Definitely will do that. But before we go, do you have any anything you want to promote? Any shout outs? What are ways people can talk to you, not only about the Indianapolis Colts, but sports in general?
Yeah, anyone that wants to talk sports can always get at me on Twitter. It's just Spenser_Tilus. I'm on there all the time, kind of part of the business, and I love talking, whether it's about the Colts, the Lakers, or just sports in general. So anyone that wants to connect definitely can reach me on there.
Definitely. And I really appreciate it, Spencer. Thank you so much. What we'll do for everybody who's been watching, I really appreciate it. This was the final interview I was getting for the podcast, the array of podcasts that I'll be doing in the next few days. So, of course, anybody, wherever you listen to your podcast on iHeart, Apple, Podbean, wherever else, Spotify, just keep a lookout for our series of NFL playoff preview podcast, talking with all the teams that either made the cut or fell just short. And definitely for everybody who's been watching, I really appreciate it. Spencer, we'll finish this up in the studio off air, but for everybody who's been watching, see you guys, and it's been really fun doing this. Yeah, a little harrowing, but it's worth every bit of it. Again, thank you guys, and for Spencer, I'm Earl Holland, and we'll see you guys soon. We'll see you guys Thursday for our next live stream. Hall of Fame preview, Baseball Hall of Fame. Will Bonds and Schilling get in? We'll see if the fans give their take on it.